Warning: an American will be attempting a Scottish accent. Be prepared for hilarity and let the mocking begin. Also, there's sex and violence in the book to be reviewed. And just to get it out of the way... Outlander! We have your woman! Outlander! Children of the Corn, anyone? Anyone? That's fine.
Alright, for all you lovebirds out there on this Valentine's Day, we're going to be reviewing a great love story between an English woman and a Scottish man. There's love, there's violence, there's time travel, and there's men in kilts. So here it is, Wiggy reviews Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. Alright, enough with the accents, let's just get on with the review. So, today I am reviewing Outlander by Diana Gabaldon, and the basic story is an ex-war nurse from 1945, Claire Randall, is magically transported back in time to the 1700s, Scotland Highlands, where she meets Jamie Fraser, a Scottish man, and due to circumstances that neither of them can really control, they are forced to marry, to protect each other, and ultimately fall in love. And the whole story is basically her trying to get back to her time period, back to her husband in 1945, Frank Randall, while also running away from his ancestor, Captain Jonathan Randall, Black Jack Randall, who is trying to figure out if she's a spy. And I know that sounds a little confusing at first if you haven't actually been familiar with the story, but most people know this book now because there's a TV show on Starz based off of the book that has been getting a lot of attention for numerous reasons, but we're not going to talk about that, we're talking about the book. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump right in with a little more about the story. So Claire and her husband Frank were both involved in World War II. She was a nurse. He was, if I remember correctly, he helped with planning attacks and that kind of thing and getting messages and all that. But once the war is over, they find that they're having a difficult time, getting back into the romantic groove that they had when they first got married. So they decide to go to the Scotland Highlands to rekindle, have like a second honeymoon, but also to research Frank's ancestor, Jonathan Randall, Captain Jonathan Randall, Black Jack Randall, all these names that he goes by. He was stationed there in the 1700s, just before another war, before a war that happens later on in that period. And they start to have a little bit of their spark back, but Claire kind of goes off and does her own thing a few times, and one time when she's going off to collect flowers, she goes to this little mini Stonehenge place. I'm not even going to try to say what it is called because it's in Gaelic and I am not going to butcher that gorgeous, beautiful language. Anyways, so she goes there on her own, and suddenly she is transported back to the late 1700s, 1745, I believe, where she is plopped right down in the middle of a battle between Highland Scots and the English, little English army, not army, but English group. And she runs into her husband's ancestor and discovers that he's actually this really creepy, horrible person who tries to rape her and thinks she's a spy and does all these horrible things. So while he's attempting to attack her, he is attacked by a Scottish man, and the Scotsman takes her away, thinking that since he was attacking her, she may be useful to them. And he brings her to Dougal Mackenzie, who is one of the heads of the Mackenzie Clan, which is the lands they are in. And while there, she puts her nursing skill to use, healing one of their wounded comrades, who turns out to be Jamie Fraser. And during all this, no one knows who she is. She can't really tell them who she is, so she starts going by the name Claire Bouchon. Or Beecham is how she pronounces it, Claire Beecham. and they think she's a spy for the English, but then they're like, well, the English were attacking her, blah, 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 all this convolution. Eventually, they decide they're gonna keep her with them, and hopefully, maybe they can get some information out of her. So they take her back to the Mackenzie castle, where she meets Cullum, Dougal's brother, who is the head of the clan. And so she starts learning that she is a prisoner, but she still has a little bit of freedom as long as, you know, she doesn't try to run away. And during this period, she befriends Jamie Fraser. She befriends a few of the women in the castle, and they go through their normal everyday lives, and she's just kind of there as a welcomed prisoner, I guess, a person. And eventually they decide, you know, they can trust her a little bit, but they really want to know who she is. So they plan something where they take her on when they're going around through all the clans, and they're gathering money for a war effort, and for the Mackenzie clan, their usual like rent to be on the land. And eventually they take her to Randall, and they quickly learn that she was telling the truth. Like, she has nothing to do with the English army. They are actually really... Randall is kind of still mad at her for, you know, causing him to be attacked and, you know, basically dishonoring him as a man. And so Dougal realizes that, okay, she's not a spy for them at least, and we need to protect her because they really want her for some reason, and that might mean she might be a spy for someone else and we can use her. So a wedding is quickly thought up. They're like, the only way we can protect you is if you marry into the Mackenzie clan. And she's like, well, I don't want to marry anybody. And so they eventually, with a lot of, you know, talking and getting her convinced, she ends up marrying young Jamie Fraser. And it's, you know, right away it's kind of like, ugh, we're just doing this because we have to do it. And then, of course, the scene that everyone always talks about, they talk about it from the TV show and from the book, the wedding night. So they get married, and they have to prove that they've been married. So Dougal says, go up and be a married couple. So they go up, and they do it. And then, you know, she's now protected by the Mackenzie clan. She's part of the Mackenzie clan. The English cannot have her, and she's safe. Now, I'm not going to get into too much more details after that, because after that it starts getting into the more I guess I'll say it gets into the inner details and the inner linking of different stories and all this. And there's a lot of stories in there besides the main one, besides the one where Claire is just constantly trying to get home. So, long story short, she and Jamie fall in love, and eventually, you know, there's a lot of sex in the book. I'm not going to lie, there is, but we are all mature adults here, and, you know, it didn't take away from the story. Some people would say that they were just constantly having sex, and it's like, well, when you're a newlywed, isn't that what you do? I don't know, I'm not married. So anyways, the sex didn't take anything away from it. The violence and the fighting, because there is also a lot of violence, a lot of fighting, didn't take anything away from it. It was kind of nice, because, you know, it's what happened back then. It was during technically a pre-war time, so tensions were high between a lot of people. And, you know, the interactions between the characters are great. I enjoyed every character. Like, there were a lot of characters, but unlike other books, it was actually easy to keep them straight, even though I couldn't pronounce half their names, but it was easy to keep them straight, and they all added things to the story. They all added good things, and they kept the story going in the way that it should be going, like not adding a character just because we need one. Like, they added the character, and she or he actually had purpose, and it wasn't a forced purpose. And I know there's a lot of controversy that seems to be coming up in all books nowadays, but a major controversy that seemed to come up in this was there's a part in the book where Claire runs off because, you know, she's still trying to get back home. She runs off thinking she can make it to the Stonehenge where she was transported to. She thinks she can make it, and then she's captured by the English, and, you know, Randall is real pissed at her. He's ready to just, like, you know, he he hurts her, he is about to rape her when Jamie comes and saves her, and people get upset because after that scene, Jamie beats her. Now, I'm doing the magic fingers because using the term beat is not what I would call it. He did take her, and he took his belt, and he, you know, hit her over the backside. And a lot of people are saying this is promoting abuse and beatings, and it wasn't, because she fought him the entire time. He felt awful about doing it, but he was expected to do it by all of the clansmen who were waiting downstairs to see if he would do it. And, you know, and I know people are saying, well, you can't say it's because of the time period, because if you're saying that it's acceptable for people, because not everyone in that time period did it. No, they didn't. But it's not like, I mean, but it happened, you know? It was part of their culture, like, you did something wrong, you must be punished. And really, she kind of got off easy, because throughout the other parts of the book, there's a boy who gets his ear nailed to a post, and a woman who is threatened to be beaten in front of a public audience, and she's only 18. But people seem to not have a problem with that, or they choose to overlook it because they don't think it's as bad as her being beat up the backside with a belt. And all I can say is, you know, you didn't have to read it. You knew where it was going. You know it was coming up. They'd been talking about it for a while. Just skip it if you don't want to read it. The fact is, she never forgave him for it. She told him, like, I will never forgive you, and he felt horrible about it. But he knew he had to do it, or else he would be looked down on as a man, as a part of the clan, and, you know, and the only thing they have is the clan. Like, the clan protects them, and he needs their protection. So, people are uncomfortable with it. I had no problem with it. I thought it was actually well done. Like, it could have gone to that horrible place that people think it went to, but it didn't. It kept it very tasteful, and it was resolved in the way that it should have been. She never forgave him for it. He felt bad about it, but at the same time, he was like, I have to do it. Now, with all of that said, let's get to the scoring of it for the sake of the book. It was well written, and I don't care what anyone says, Diana Gabaldon did a lot of research for this book, and you can tell, like, she actually learned what, like, medicinal practices were going on in the 1700s. She actually looked up all these plants and all these, like, procedures that are way outdated, and she, like, you could tell she spent a lot of time making sure this was right, because she really wanted it to feel like that time period. And the language was brilliant to read. You know, sometimes I don't enjoy when they actually write out phonetically what people are saying, but for the Scottish men, for the clansmen, it was actually done well and not distracting. Although it was weird getting used to, instead of, you know, no, K-N-O-W, they say kin. And that was very K-E-N, and that was like the only thing I had trouble getting past. I always had to stop and be like, no, what is that? Oh, it means no. But that was just me having trouble. But otherwise, it wasn't distracting, and it actually really helped set the tone and set the location very well. Now, like I said, story was well written, very greatly researched, and appreciate the research. The pacing was a little slow for me in the beginning, in 1945. I don't know if that was purposeful or if it was just, I don't know, it was very slow getting into the story until we actually got to the 1700s, until she actually got knocked back in time. Then it really started picking up and I couldn't put the book down. But I don't know, maybe it's just because I was expecting that the whole time, so the whole part in the present was just kind of like, oh, I just want to get to the men in the kilts, come on, you know. But you know what, like I said, once I got into it, it was great. And let's see what else. The only other complaint I have is Captain Jack Randall, the villain for this book. I feel like we didn't resolve a lot with him by the end of the book. Like, I still had a lot of questions, and I don't know if he's coming back for the other books. I haven't read the second book or the other ones, so I don't know if he comes back and if we resolve all of those. But it just kind of felt really quick at the end, like all of a sudden, nope, and we're done with him. And it was interesting because I felt like he had a very interesting backstory that we didn't get a chance to explore. So I'm hoping that he does come back in the next books, but they kind of, well, we'll see. Overall though, I think I give the book a 9 out of 10. Just like for the slow pacing in the beginning, the kind of quick wrap up at the end, but otherwise the story all the way through is great. I loved reading about the Scotland Highlands in the 1700s. I'm not 100% sure how historically accurate the actual clans were. I believe she made up the clan name and the locations, but I mean, you know, that's what fiction is for. The violence and the sex wasn't distracting, didn't take me out of the story. You know, some people just can't get past that. I'm one who I'm like, if I'm uncomfortable with it, I'll just flip the page and skip it. But I didn't feel like I needed to, because it didn't ruin anything. You know? And I loved how she kept the phonetic Scottish in the language. I think that was actually really well done. And it didn't take me out trying to struggle to read through a sentence. So besides that, slow pacing in the beginning, quick wrap up in the end, good story, good overall characters. I don't think there was a single character I really disliked. Like disliked as in that they weren't written well. Jack Randall, I really, he's a villain and I get, but overall characters were great, story was great, pacing once it got going was great, and I highly recommend the book if you're into historical fictions. You know, it was really well written, and if you're interested in writing historical fictions, I think it's a good way to look at how much research she did and put into it, and that's how much you should put into a historical fiction if you're going to be writing one. There can be fiction elements in it, but you have to base it in fact. And so once again, I give Outlander by Diana Gabaldon 9 out of 10. And I guess we'll see you next time, and I hope everyone has a happy Valentine's Day. And we'll see you next time on Wiggy Reviews. Well, the Scotsman clad in kilt left to borrow an evening fare. One could tell by how he walked that he took more than his share. Fumbled round until he could no longer keep his feet. Stumbled off beside the grass to sleep beside the street. Oh! If you don't know what that song is, you should look it up. It is by Brian Bowers. The Scotsman. The Scotsman by Brian Bowers. Very good song.